Little side section of the show that I thought would be fun. My son Dexter had been on the show previously with the Jason X episode, and my daughter Dolly, or Dahlia, thought that she would like to be on the show as well. She's a big horror fan, one of the biggest horror fans I know, and I thought it would be fun to ask her 5 films that she would recommend during the Halloween season. So here they are. Dahlia, how are you doing?
Good.
Good. Awesome. I'm glad that you are good. So you have 5 movies for me, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay. What is your number 5?
Um, It Chapter 1.
It Chapter 1, like the newer one, not the classic It.
Yeah,
but
the
okay.
newer one.
Okay, cool. Why would you recommend It Chapter 1?
Well, it's really scary and very fun to watch. There's really fun stuff to think about, and it can be really scary, and it'll give you nightmares for about a week.
Okay, well that's a good enough reason. Awesome. So everyone, It Chapter 1. What's your number 4?
Number 4 now. Okay. Us.
Us? Like the Jordan Peele movie Us?
Yes.
Awesome. That is so cool. Why would you recommend that one?
Well, it's very scary, and it's about these people who it kind of takes a little twist into it.
It's about these people and it takes a twist. What does that even mean?
Well, these people, they're living in this one house, and they see these people, they think it's trying to kill them, but
It's actually them, huh?
yeah,
It's weird. I
basically
love
like
that
the other
movie.
way.
That
So it
movie's
gets
great.
a big twist.
Yeah. I would definitely recommend that one as well. It's one of my favorite movies of this year. Okay, number 3.
Okay, well, number 3, I would recommend like the new Halloween that came out on October.
Oh, like last year?
19th?
Like
Yeah.
David Gordon Green's Halloween?
Yeah.
Awesome. Why would you recommend that one? I love that movie.
Well, it has like Michael Myers in it. He comes back from 3 and then to a very, very different one. It's really cool.
Yeah, I like that one too. It's really cool. It's cool to see Laurie Strode come back and
Yeah, she's all afraid about what happened. She's all geared up.
she's geared up, right?
Ready for action.
Geared up. You're dark. Okay.
Ready for action.
Okay, number 2. What is your number 2?
Number 4.
No, wait, 5, 4, 3. No, you're number 2.
Okay.
Okay,
No.
number 2. What is it?
Well, it is really. It should. It should be Halloween 4.
Halloween 4. Oh, cool. I love that movie. That's actually one of my favorite movies of all time. Okay, why Halloween 4?
Well, Halloween 4.
Which is funny because this is the Halloween 4 episode. Go for it. Why Halloween 4?
Halloween 4 because it's really fun to watch, and Michael Myers, he's like all popping up everywhere, and Jamie, she saw his mask, and then she's just all freaked out.
Yeah, I like that one a lot.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's cool.
number 1. Your number 1 movie to watch during the Halloween season.
I like 3 actually, Halloween 3.
So you got a lot of Halloween movies in this list. Why Halloween 3?
Well, because it kind of doesn't show Michael Myers because it's coming back with new villains on there, and they see this mask and they kind of turn evil, but not really.
The mask kind of killed the children, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Dr. Chalice has to stop it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that movie. Do you have any other recommendations really quickly? I know you're a big Scream fan.
Oh yeah, Scream. Scream all the way.
Scream all the way? Which one out of all 4 of them, which one would you recommend the most?
I believe, isn't it 4, that one where Ghostface throws the pillows?
I'm not sure. I've only seen it once.
Yeah.
That one? What else? I know you're a big Trick or Treat fan too.
Oh, Trick or Treat, speaking of Sam. He is this little kid who's a demon under his, like, basically his mask and his...
It's a bunch of stories, right? An
Yeah,
anthology?
tons of...
Awesome. Well, there you go, guys. That was Dahlia Smith's recommendations for your Halloween season. If you haven't seen these movies, you should. And I would recommend, and obviously Dahlia would recommend, you checking them out.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Pod and the Pendulum. another little bonus part as we wrap up our Halloween 3 episode here. We figure if Jerry and Dahlia are going to get in on the act and talk about Dahlia's 5 recommendations for the holiday season, Halloween season. Here is my daughter Ada giving her 5 movie recommendations for this Halloween season. How are you doing tonight, Ada?
Good.
You've had a busy weekend.
Yeah.
Your first haunted house.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Reese squeezed me to death.
Oh my goodness. That was pretty spooky. I don't know how you're going to go back to school after those haunted halls. I hope the
Reese was the one who's like, I'm not scared, and if they touch me, I'm going to punch them in the face. And then the second we got in, she started screaming, I don't want to go in.
It was bananas. Okay, Ada, so why don't you tell our listeners 5 what's the first movie out of 5 you would recommend for Halloween season?
Probably Shaun of the Dead.
Oh, what do you like about Shaun of the Dead?
It's a fun movie, but it's also scary.
What was the scary bit about it?
The part where the zombies are about that guy.
Yeah, that was pretty scary when they rip him up
Yeah.
into a lot of pieces.
Yeah.
So that's one movie. What's another one you'd recommend?
Nightmare on Elm Street 3.
Nightmare on Elm Street, the third one. Yeah?
Where they're in the mental hospital.
Uh-huh.
I thought that one was fun.
And that was a lot of fun. Yeah. What were some of the fun bits in that one?
I liked all of it.
You liked all of it?
Yeah.
You could pick out one
Except
bit?
the part where the Freddy Krueger killed the original girl.
Yeah, that wasn't so good. People wish that she was back. She's in the last one, too, though.
How? She's dead.
She plays herself.
Okay.
Exactly. Daddy feels the same way from the look on your face. What's another one you would recommend?
There's a lot of movies to choose from.
I know.
I don't.
What did we watch last week that you really liked? That was pretty scary.
What did we watch?
What did we watch? It had Sam in it.
Oh yeah, Trick or Treat. I like Trick or Treat. That was a good one.
Yeah, no, that was pretty scary though, right?
Yeah.
Do you think it was scarier the second time or the first time you saw it?
The first time.
The first time? Really? I thought you were more scared this time because you kind of knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, probably the second time because I knew it was going to happen. It was creepier.
You had a nightmare that night.
Yeah.
You had a giant chocolate head and Sam kept trying to eat it or something.
I think that was you, Dad.
Not trying to eat your head. Maybe it was the kitten trying to eat your head.
Dad.
So that's 3. We need 2 more picks.
Let me think. So there's...
Because you've watched a lot of horror movies.
Yeah. Oh, I like The Blair Witch.
Oh my goodness. What was fun about that movie? That's a really good Halloween movie.
Because it was creepy and you could see what was going on, and it was all, but there were some parts where you were like at the end you didn't know what was going to happen and you were scared. And there's also a lot of, since it's like one of the first movies who use the internet to trick people, it was really fun because you can go on all these websites which are like,
I hope you're not going on these websites.
No, which are like based on that, which are fake. But then, like, if you want to watch more, you can just go on to YouTube and search up something. It's like Blair Witch, and then it will come up as more things that you didn't know because they wanted to make it seem real. So they did more and they did more film to try to trick people into thinking it was a documentary.
So you could make the whole story in your head at that point, huh?
Yeah.
Now, what would be for a 5th pick, what's a fun Halloween movie for people that don't necessarily like to get scared?
Okay, I was just about to say It for the next one.
So It is pretty scary, though,
yeah,
isn't it? Pennywise the Clown.
Another one is It. Let's not be...
So that could be
people who don't like to be...
So It is your 5th pick. Give me a special bonus pick, then.
Okay.
A family-friendly. Something that Mom would like when she doesn't want to watch a horror movie but wants a Halloween movie.
Okay. Usually you show me all the scary ones.
I know. Well, what have we watched that is like not super scary but fun?
Oh my god, I forget what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
You know that one where it's the 4th of July and there are aliens?
Uh-huh.
I forget what that was called. Independence Day?
Independence Day for Halloween?
Yeah, but still a good one.
All right.
doesn't mean it's not good.
Fair enough. So halfway to Halloween, we'll watch Independence Day. All right, Ada, do you have any last words for our listeners?
No, I just thought of something.
What
if the actors are still actors and not real people, and they didn't actually die after that? So if they walked, when they finished and the movie was sent out and people watched it and went all crazy and everybody was watching it.
Yeah. What movie are you talking about?
The Blair Witch.
Oh, honey, they are actors. They weren't real.
I know, but what if people you look exactly like this person from a movie I saw?
What happened. People thought they were really dead.
Yeah, so they're like, you look exactly like somebody from a movie I saw.
So anything
to say to our listeners? You couldn't really tell anybody. No.
No Happy Halloween or anything?
Happy Halloween.
Well, too late now. All right, you go to bed.
No.
Halloween, Halloween, happy, happy Halloween, silver shamrock. Happy, happy Halloween, 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 happy, happy Halloween, silver shamrock.
It's almost time, kids. The clock is ticking. Be in front of your TV sets for the horror-thon. And remember the big giveaway at 9. Don't miss it. And don't forget to wear your masks. The clock is ticking. It's almost time.
Happy, happy Halloween, 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 happy, happy Halloween, silver shamrock. Happy, happy Halloween, 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 happy, happy Halloween, silver shamrock.
Hurry home, it's almost time. All those lucky kids with silver shamrock masks, hurry home for the big giveaway. It's almost time. Hurry home.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Pod and the Pendulum, your horror movie podcast covering every single horror movie franchise, one movie, one episode at a time. I'm your host, Mike Snoonian, joined once again by my co-host, Jerry Smith. Jerry, how are we feeling today?
I'm doing great. I do have to say, though, and I've wanted to say this for a long time, your intro to these episodes, to every episode, It makes me smile every time because there's just so much energy that it reminds me of Mrs. Doubtfire.
It's my guy Smiley. It's my guy Smiley from the Muppets.
No, but I am so excited about this episode. This is actually one of my favorite movies of all time. Not just in the Hollywood series, just in general.
Me too.
Movie. Yeah, it's a great movie. I mean, now that we're not talking about garbage like Halloween 1 from 1978, absolute trash. One of the most reviled movies ever made. No, I'm kidding. Please don't hate us right now. I'm joking, people. But Jerry, we are joined by a super special guest tonight, a longtime friend of mine, who I'm really excited to have on. Filmmaker, author, writer, entrepreneur, you name it, she wears a million different hats. We have Miss IZZY Lee joining us tonight. Izzy, how are we doing?
Hello, I'm super awesome. Thanks for having me, man.
So excited to have you on. And we've tried to get you on before, and you're like, let me know when you're doing Halloween 3. So we had this one bookmarked for a while here. So how we always like to start, Izzy, is we like to talk a little bit about what it is about this particular entry that made you say, this is why I want to jump on. So tell us when you first fell in love with Halloween 3 and Tom Atkins.
Oh, my God. All right. So I first saw Tom Atkins in Night of the Creeps in, I want to say, the early 90s on Monster Vision, Joe Bob's Monster Vision on TNT, along with a whole other slew of amazing movies like The Brood and Phantasm. Holy shit, that show really was an amazing eye-opener. Oh, and Motel Hell is another one. I didn't see Halloween 3 until later, and I can't remember when that was. I've seen the movie about 1 billion times, and it all just sort of sinks into each other. But I was like, hey, this is Tom Atkins, and this looks like a really weird, bizarre, weirdo movie, and people hate it. I have to see it. So, yeah.
And it's funny, we know it's been a long time since you first saw the movie then, because nobody hates this movie anymore.
Yeah, good.
It's one of those things.
It's weird.
Yeah. It's one of those things where everyone's like, "Oh no, I always loved Halloween 3." It's like people that say they were at like Ted Williams' last ball game, like 10,000 people were there. But if you ask anyone, like Fenway had 500,000 people that day. So
Ridiculous.
No, they're all liars.
Yeah, they
you know,
are.
like I had the flu when I was I think 11, and my mom took me to rent like just a whole bunch of VHS movies, you know, just to keep me busy while I was, you know, away from school for a few days. And one of them was Halloween 3. So I was 11 when I first saw the movie, and from that moment on, it's just there is so much to love in that movie, and I found myself defending it for decades. So while see that, and I'm always on the line of like at one end being really excited that people love it now, but at the other end being like, what the hell? Where were you guys when people would, you know, call me a loser for liking Halloween 3?
Yeah, it's like when someone's band blows up and you're like, the first 7-inch was better. You know, it's one of those things where you want to be almost like protective of that band or that art at that point. I think I saw this when I was super young because I remember my uncle, I would go visit him on Fridays. He would watch us, and he was the first person I knew that had a VCR. And he was like, I'm going to watch The Shining, and I'm going to watch Salem's Lot, and I'm going to watch Halloween 3. And if a bunch of 8-year-olds happen to be in the room, so be it. So I was too young to pick up on a lot of what's going on in this movie, but the one thing that always stood out was the face melting scene with the masks. Like, that's the one thing I always remembered from this movie. And I think this is probably... I know I would watch Halloween 2 when it played on the local TV stations as a kid, but I think I saw this before even that happened overall.
Nice.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Okay. So what can we talk about here? Let's talk about the background of this movie overall. This is the movie that almost killed the Halloween franchise, right?
Yeah.
It did. And, you know, one thing that kind of not bothers me, because I mean, I'm not like actively pissed off about it, but when you think about the background of Halloween 3 and you read all these articles, one thing I think is kind of important is Joe Dante's involvement.
Wait, what? Tell me more.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Oh, wow.
I don't know this.
Yeah. Joe Dante was the original director, actually. He was John Carpenter's first choice.
Oh, no way.
And Joe Dante was actually the person who kind of pushed Carpenter into approaching Nigel Neal to write it. The only reason Joe Dante dropped out is because Spielberg and everyone kind of offered him to be involved with Twilight Zone. So that's when a lot of the kind of anthology ideas come from Carpenter, but Joe Dante had a heavy hand in all that too.
I have never heard that before.
Oh yeah, definitely. That, and I think it's really interesting. I'm a huge fan of Joe Dante, but I mean, I think the film would have been like just dramatically different. I think what Tommy Lee Wallace brought to the movie is such a great homage to kind of like the Body Snatchers, kind of films, but and it has that kind of dark tone to it. Like I still wonder like what Dante's movie would have been like though.
For sure. Do you know why he dropped out?
Yeah, just because of Twilight Zone. They offered him that, and he thought it would have been like a bigger opportunity, which obviously it was. So.
Yep. Yeah. Well, it had a troubled history all of itself. Yeah. So, I mean, if Halloween, there's like 3 less dead people involved with Season of the Witch, so it does have that going for it. So, we'll go there. We'll absolutely go there. So you're right. The first thing, a name you mentioned was Nigel Neal, who is the creator of like the British Quatermass series, who was brought on by Carpenter to write the script. And it didn't have like a real horror element to it overall. It was more about psychological horror and identity. And Carpenter hated the script initially.
Well, if I remember correctly, like, I mean, it was definitely more character driven in a way that, like, I think the jump from the kind of suspense in Halloween 2 to the more like gory kind of approach in Halloween 3 or Halloween 2, I mean. I think the next step would have been something more along the lines of what Halloween 3 was. And I think Neil kind of had this idea to make it more like those old school Quatermass movies, more about paranoia and less about, actual like scares and stuff.
There's some sci-fi elements in there too, and it's just a whole wacky thing. Tommy Lee Wallace went and did his director's pass, and strangely enough, he's the sole credited writer. If you watch the
Mhm.
film, it says written and directed by Tom Lee Wallace.
Yeah.
But if you watch the extras on the latest Scream Factory releases, he's like, there's no way I should have just been credited. He does bring up, Mr. Quatermass for sure.
So you guys would know a bit more about who gets credited for what than I would overall. So why would that be? So you're right, because Wallace said about 60 to 70% of Neil's script remained intact overall, and the basic story is intact. Why would he not be credited as a writer? How does that get divvied up?
Well, I think it's because Neil had like a really bad history of his writing kind of being affected in Hollywood and tampered with. So with all the arguments between Wallace, Carpenter, and Nigel Neal, he demanded his name be taken off.
Okay.
Like, he didn't want anything to do with it, and I think it's really awesome and very humble of Tommy Lee Wallace to give, Nigel Neal credit on that Scream Factory Blu-ray, because, Neil didn't even want credit for it when it came out.
Crazy.
So Neil was Alan Moore before there was Alan Moore's, basically, is what you're saying.
Minus the chaos magic and that kind of stuff.
Right. So, and Jerry, you and I had talked about this a little bit on our Halloween 2 episode, where now Carpenter and Deborah Hill are going back to their original idea they had for Halloween as a series, where it's not just about like a slasher killer that goes around hunting co-eds and hospital workers down, but really exploring the different mythology behind the holiday of Halloween and looking at the different aspects over it all. So what are some of the key elements that we're exploring here that they were trying to explore with Halloween 3?
I think they took the idea of Saw Win or Sam Hain and kind of ran with it, and I think that's really awesome because prior to Halloween 3, we really hadn't got much of that. Obviously there's some real batshit stuff going on. If anyone hasn't seen Halloween 3 and you tell them, yeah, it's the third movie, no Michael Myers, but there's druid robot loving bad guys who are obsessed with Stonehenge and Saw Win. Even that, how can you not love that?
Right.
You don't need a new Scream Factory release to make me fall in love with that plot.
Right.
From 10 or 11 on, that was just my shit. There's a lot. It's all about tricks. And I think that's great. It kind of takes that trick or treat vibe and it puts the emphasis on the tricks, and that's basically what Cochrane's doing. He wants to play the ultimate trick on all of our children, and it's devilish. It's just cynical as fuck. And God, I love this movie.
I do too. It's so brutal to kids. Kids
What's
never
funny
come
is,
into a good end in my movies either.
Right. What's funny is, and we'll probably talk about this more in the episode, but I interviewed Tom Atkins for a piece on Halloween 3, actually, for Scream Magazine recently.
Nice.
And I asked the question, I was like, okay, me personally, all the kids died. What do you feel?
Oh, he's such an optimist too. He thinks they live.
Both of them. Like, Tom Atkins insists that Atkins and Tom Lee Wallace insist, no, they had to survive because the other option's unacceptable.
And we're nihilists. We're like, no.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny because it probably that ending, it feels like straight out of John Carpenter's mind at that point, right? I mean, at the end of the day, Carpenter is not one to shy away from a really, not necessarily brutal ending, but nihilistic ending. You have the end of Halloween where the shape is gone and you're revisiting all of these locations from the film, and it's like the shape could be anywhere, evil can be anywhere at this point. You have the end of The Thing where you have one of these two men are going to be some sort of alien, but you don't know who, and it ends in paranoia. You have In the Mouth of Madness where the world is going to end, we're trapped in an insane asylum. Prince of Darkness, they go through the ringer, and at the end of you find out all of these messages have been sent from the future, and there's nothing they can really do to prevent hell on earth at that point. John Carpenter he's not writing for Disney, basically.
Well, what's funny about that is the studios hated the ending so much because of how nihilistic it was. And they said, you need to reshoot it. And Carpenter stepped in and told Tom Lee Wallace, dude, this is your movie. If you want to keep that ending, I'll support you 100%. But it was Tommy Lee Wallace that made the decision to keep that in there.
Mm-hmm.
I love
So
it.
it sounds like he is a sadist as well. So welcome to the club, Tommy.
No.
Yay!
So, oh boy. All right. So coming off the success of Halloween 2, by 1983, where are slasher movies at this point? Are we at the end of this cycle overall, would you say?
No, I mean
They
we
never
still
went
have.
away, man. No.
Yeah, right. No,
Not
but
at
even
all.
we even still had Friday the 13th going strong.
Mhm.
I mean, dude. I mean, what 3, 4's coming up at this point?
Mhm.
You know, I don't think we saw the kind of backlash. Well, not. I mean, there's been a backlash on slasher movies, but as far as like horror fans and stuff, I still think it was alive and kicking at this point, which
Mhm.
makes sense that there's so much gore in Halloween 3, and I think sometimes people forget that I think Halloween 3 might be the goriest of the series, you know, until Rob Zombie took over and did
Mhm.
his thing.
Mm.
But I think we don't have, like, when you look at 1981, you have, like, The Prowler, My Bloody Valentine, Halloween 2, Friday the 13th Part 2. You're, like, getting these really Happy Birthday to Me. You're getting these really, like, classic ones. Aside from, say, like, Sleepaway Camp, I can't think of, like, a big... And Friday the 13th Part 3, I can't think of, like, a really big slasher movie from that year.
Hmm.
It feels like they're around, like, don't get me wrong, like, they're still around, but I don't think you have that, like, the churning and burning of, like, slashers like you had at that point.
I think
Yeah, I
there was
think
the Slumber Party Massacre that year in Pieces. What? I think so.
Yeah,
gonna look it up.
I think Bava had a Blade in the Dark.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, I mean, we had stuff like Christine or Cujo or Deadly Spawn or things like
Mhm.
that. So, I mean, yeah, you definitely have a point.
Because this is, I guess my larger point is, like, now the Halloween, for the first time, the Halloween series is moving away. Like, this is not, even though it's very violent, it's not a slasher movie, right?
No,
I
not at
would
all.
say, no. What would you even call it? There's like sci-fi elements. There's fucking folklore horror. There's.
I think it should
it's
fall
such a-
into that subgenre of perfection, to be honest.
Maybe a little bit of a romantic comedy with.
Yes.
Oh
Um,
my god! You guys, you know the leads were 24 years apart.
Oh, I believe that.
That makes me so uncomfortable. No, I looked it up last night
Mm-hmm.
because I rewatched the film because I had to.
Mm-hmm.
So it came out yesterday. It was 37 years ago. So happy
Yeah.
birthday to Halloween 3. So yeah.
Well,
I think
What's
Tom
funny-
Atkins was born at 40 years old.
It's
as far
true.
as-
What's funny is Tom Atkins, you know, Daniel Chalice, the character, he's such a womanizer. But what I would have always found funny is Tom Atkins' wife at the time was in the movie. Like, he was married to Garn Stevens that played Marge.
Right.
So I couldn't imagine being in a movie and your spouse is just like the complete like biggest like, you know, ladies man, and you're just like, yeah, I guess, you know.
Hey, if you get cast, you get cast. You got to take the
Right.
work, you know. Maybe her getting a role was the sort of like a consolation prize. I don't know.
So, yeah, I would say, like, category wise, you could put this under like sci-fi horror, or maybe even like like this to me is like a psychological thriller in a lot of ways, because it deals with identity and it deals with not knowing who you can trust overall. But there's like a sci-fi and fantasy element to it that's, you know, largely absent. Well, it's absent in every other horror movie, Halloween movie.
I love horror that is like built on paranoia, you
Mhm.
know, and I think Halloween 3 is such a just classic example of that. You know, like you don't, like you said, you don't know if you don't know who is themselves. You don't know who's the robot. You know, you don't know any of that stuff. And the movie doesn't really walk you through it. You know, it doesn't give you answers. I mean, to this day, we still don't know if Ellie was a robot the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I love that Halloween 3 never feels the need to answer every single thing for its audience. It lets it be its own thing.
I agree with you there. It's nice not to know all the answers, because if you
Yeah.
do, like, why you wouldn't stop thinking about it otherwise, you know? You would be placated and you would move on and it wouldn't be as impactful.
Right.
I think that's one of my biggest issues, like we said in the last episode with Halloween 2. I don't want to know why Michael Myers is doing that stuff,
Right.
you know? And I kind of like that element of Halloween 3 to where, like, I mean, even as a kid, my whole reasoning for it was like, man, they're just dicks. You know, they just want to play tricks on kids, and that's kind of
totally.
You know, and you don't get an answer to the question, why now? Because the Silver Shamrock Company wasn't like a first-year company that came out of the blue. Like, they had been making costumes and masks, and they had, like, really... They basically set up their own town with Santa Mira. Why now, of all times? You know, and you never get an answer to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something really devious about that. Like, you know, and I think that if this movie was a standalone movie that was successful on its own and sort of like launched a franchise in and of itself, you would have like a prequel explaining like why those masks were chosen. You know, like maybe Cochran would have walked in and his mother would have like dumped acid on her face and he was left seeing a grinning skull or something. You would get something like ridiculous like that, but you do have all those questions. Like, you know, like you can kind of understand why the children, but like what took so long to get this plan in motion.
Right.
Well, I think as any parent could agree with, sometimes, you know, you just get to the point where you want to kill your children. And there's no, you know, maybe it was just time that they were just like, you know what, the bastards have gone too far.
Have either of you read the novelization?
No, that is like the Halloween novelizations to me, like that is my like just Moby Dick. I cannot find any of them, and I refuse to read like digital copies. So
sure.
I haven't.
I have Halloween 3, but I have not read it yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I'm sort of like psyched out about it. Like, I don't know. Like, do I want to know?
I was researching the book, and it says that they kind of hint that Cochran lives at the end of the novelization.
Well, it sort of seemed that way in the movie where he just disappeared. He's grinning and waving goodbye. Like, see you later,
Stonehenge,
bro.
basically, they say that Stonehenge kind of transports him to somewhere else.
Yeah. I mean, that would make sense, I guess.
Well, you could see him... I guess you could see him maybe not as a human, but as a trickster. You know, maybe he's like a Loki type character that he's going to set up shop somewhere else if this plan doesn't work.
That would make sense too. Yeah.
So
but it did work. Sorry, Tom.
But it did. Sorry.
In our minds, it worked. Yeah.
There are no more children overall.
Bye.
I think when it comes to like the production itself, one thing that is really important to address is that, like Halloween 2, Halloween 3 in a lot of ways was that kind of family affair. You know, a lot of the creative team came back. You know, Tom Lee Wallace was heavily involved in the first 2 films behind the scenes.
Right.
You know, he came to direct. You know, Carpenter, Deborah Hill producing. You know, Tom Atkins had, you know, been part of Carpenter's crew for a while. And also it's cool. Like I said, Tom Atkins brought his wife, Garn Stevens, into it. I mean, Nancy Loomis or Nancy Keys came back. She was married to Tommy Lee Wallace at the time.
Right.
Like I think Halloween 3 is the last Halloween film that was very much a family affair. I mean, it could be argued that it was a family affair from 4 on as well. But to be honest, that family is 100% just the Akkads from here on out. You know, like this is the last Halloween film where it's basically the same creative crew from the first 2 films.
And Dean Cundy is back. Like he's your DP on this as well. So even though it's a much different film from Halloween 1 and 2, it still retains that same look, right down to the opening credits having like the pumpkin opening over the soundtrack. Although you have like that digital pumpkin now with those cutting edge ColecoVision graphics at the beginning of the movie, which were like probably bleeding edge at the time.
Yeah, it was definitely the Lawnmower Man of its time, I think.
Jeez, it's better. Come on, so much better.
I'm joking. No, I agree. And I just, you know, I'll probably end up saying this so many times through this episode, but I just love this movie.
I do too. It's so crazy and weird. Great.
And there's so many things to love. And a lot of what I love about it are things that I should shake my head at. You know, like Tom Atkins we say this almost every episode for a different character, but Tom Atkins' Daniel Chalice character is the worst doctor around. Like, what is he a doctor of?
Drinking.
Kind of, right?
Dude, he's a doctor of love. That's what he's a doctor of.
It's like that, and he sees the man die. You know, Ellie comes wondering about her dad, and how does Tom Lee Wallace's character react? He just grabs a 6-pack and goes on a road trip. Like,
I mean, you might as well, right?
Yeah,
That could suck.
that scene just I'm not 100% convinced this actually isn't a documentary. They just were like following Tom Atkins around for a week, and like this is a week in the life of Tom Atkins.
That
And his
same
mustache.
that same article that I wrote for Scream, he was talking about seeing Halloween for the first time, and he said this in many interviews too, so it's not new stuff. But he said that he saw the first Halloween in a industry screening because he was friends with Adrienne Barbeau, who was dating Carpenter at the time, and they all wanted to make sure that Carpenter was an okay guy for their bud, Adrienne. Tom Atkins brought 2 women with him.
Jesus.
And would play tricks on them and tell them, no, it's okay, nothing's going to happen, on purpose, to where they would jump and he would be able to like put his arms around both of them.
Oh my gosh.
So I do agree with you, Mike. This might be a documentary.
Yeah. But I think
I even think Tom Atkins forgets kind of important things about Halloween 3 because he's divorced in the film, right?
yes.
That's my understanding.
Divorced or separated.
Because Tom Atkins, when I talked to him, he was just like, "Man, I don't get my character. Like, he had a great wife and some kids at home. Why would he just run off on them?"
Well, I
Like-
think he realized he had a great wife, but now he's gone from her. But yeah, and I think that part sums up Tom Atkins' character of Dr. Chalice so well. It's like he's promised that he's going to go take their kids trick-or-treating and hang out with them, and then he's like on a payphone like, yeah, I can't tell you where I'm going, I don't have a number, and I get this meeting I have to go to, see ya, Hank, peace out, and then just like throws a 6-pack under his arm and jogs out to his car. Like,
now that you say that, I think I know why I like this movie. Like, it is about my dad.
Oh my god.
Jesus.
Shit. I think it's about my dad too.
Oh.
Fuck.
Well, my dad is
Who
dead.
also has a mustache to this day.
Right.
Oh.
Whom I also don't speak to anymore. But yes. Oh my god, you guys.
So we're going to open up the therapy couch right
Yes.
now, and we're going to talk about daddy issues. The doctor is now in. Let's do it.
Oh, man.
no.
You know that Tom Atkins is called daddy by pretty much every lady he's ever been with. Like, no, you're going to call me daddy.
No,
know
he
that's
doesn't.
the deal.
He doesn't do that. I've met him a couple times. He's
Mhm.
super
Oh,
fucking
he's so
nice.
nice.
He
Yeah.
told me how to make fluffy pancakes. For Christ's sake, I'm serious.
Oh, man.
I will cast him one way or another.
You get
While
him
we
in
still have
some-
him. It will happen.
Yeah, he is. I mean, on par with a Bruce Campbell, just a Sid Haig, who's unfortunately no longer. He's a beloved genre legend for so many reasons.
And rightfully so. I mean, his movies are so great, but I mean, like Izzy said, he's just awesome in person as well. Like when I talked to him, he was just like, "Okay, Jerry, I gotta hurry and do this. I'm gonna get on a plane to go film the third Collector movie, but let's get this done. I'm excited." And it's just like,
Yeah, he's great.
anyone that does interviews and stuff, can agree that sometimes there's people that you really dig their work, and it's not a good experience.
Sure.
I mean, I'll probably get a lot of shit, but I believe in putting things on Front Street. Both times I've sat down with Eli Roth has been 2 of the most miserable experiences of my life.
Did he get on your wife the whole time in front of you? Like, did he?
God.
I wouldn't have minded now because I'm divorced from that person at that time.
Oh,
But,
okay.
no, like I sat down with him really quickly. I sat down with him and Famke Janssen for the Hemlock Grove press junket. And Famke Janssen was so incredibly nice. And Eli Roth sized me up from the moment I sat down. Like, it was just the most awkward thing ever. But, I digress. Tom Atkins, though, I mean, he is just the real thing. He cares about his fans. He cares about people that love his work. And he cares about doing good work. And that's why I think it shows in movies like this or Night of the Creeps or The Fog or many others.
He's the greatest. He just has a genuinely good time, and he's like happy grandpa. He's one of the greatest fucking people, actor wise, that I've met in genre.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's interesting too about his performance here, because it's always dangerous to go, well, not dangerous, like you're not going to get like an electrical shock or anything, but it can be complicated to go and look at like old art through a modern lens, because I think a character like Dr. Chalice now you would approach from like the Me Too lens and look at like how he potentially treats people around him and treats women and womanizing and say like this is a scumbag character. But Dr. Chalice never feels like a scumbag. He you know what I mean? Like he's just
portrayed as like this like I'm just torn into this. Like, it's not like a dopey thing, but he's just like,
Right.
any way the wind blows, to quote Queen. Which is why, he's no longer, his wife doesn't put up with that anymore.
But
So,
even like with the seduction scene with him and Ellie,
God.
he's like, like, all right, I can go sleep in the car, and she kind of comes on to him.
Well, where do you want to sleep, Mr. Chavez?
But next time you see that, though, I will say this in defense of against Chalice. Next time you see that, when he says about sleeping in the car, look at his eyes. He's, I'm just going to be honest. All of us men have done this at some point of our lives, unfortunately. Like, oh, do you want me to take the floor? Goddamn well you're not taking the floor.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like,
you're trying to be in the
Chalice.
bed.
But
exactly.
But at the same time, do you feel like if Ellie, okay, so based on what we know about his character, if Ellie had said, yeah, why don't you take the floor? Do you think that he would have been like, well, no, I'd actually, do you think he would have crawled up in with her at that point? Or do you think he would have?
I think it would have cut to a scene with him in the car with the six-pack saying, God damn it.
Damn it, struck out. But
I've always said that it would have been funny that if the movie just ended with him grabbing that six-pack and running.
That'd be pretty hilarious.
He has that relationship with, is it Marge, the other nurse in the movie that gets the drill through the head?
Oh, no, that's Teddy.
Teddy.
Yeah, Teddy.
So in Teddy, she has the best role in the movie because she never has to leave that room. Like, she did all of her scenes in like one afternoon because she never leaves that little office.
What's funny is that character was added in reshots. Originally, when they first filmed it, like, that character was just on the phone, when he would call. And then after a while, like, when they watched it, they were like, okay, who is this person? So they added that, after the fact. And I think that's really great because that's actually one of my favorite characters in the film, I think.
Well, yeah. It's the only, I want to say not just this movie, but a lot of early 80s films and going back, like, this is a woman, this is a character who has agency. She's not there to be ogled. She's not there to, be slashed. She has a real job. She's smart at her job. Of course, she's flirting with Dr. Childs because that's his main role in life is to flirt and, drink. But yeah, it's refreshing to see that in a film like this, where if you're talking about looking back with a Me Too lens, and honestly, it's any lens because films now are just different because our society has evolved, thankfully, at least to some extent. Not all, but some extent. It was nice to see that. It was refreshing.
Right. Well, even with Linda Chalice, I've always thought it was kind of a bummer that she is definitely portrayed as kind of like the nagging type. When it's just like, if you really think about Chalice, this guy's a womanizer. He probably cheated on that woman every other day. Why wouldn't she be kind of pissed and jaded about that stuff?
Yeah.
Well, I think the Chalices were probably at the same key party that the parents from Halloween were at. When we talk about the whole town being in a giant orgy, and that's why there are no parents around. I think I think Dan Chalice was dragging Linda to that same like key party orgy and she was like, I don't want any part of this lifestyle.
Do either of you follow those parody Halloween accounts on Twitter?
With Sheriff Brackett, yeah.
There's Sheriff Brackett. There's all of them. My favorite part of they're awful, but in the best way, because they're so like invested into keeping these characters going every single day on Twitter. My favorite one is Sheriff Brackett is pissed off that his ex-wife is now married to Dr. Chalice. So basically, Linda Chalice is the former Mrs. Brackett.
Amazing.
Oh, it's awful.
But getting back to the character of Teddy, and I think Izzy, you hit it right on the head. Like, she has agency, and it's obvious that like her and Dan have some sort of sexual relationship. Like, that's pretty apparent. But she can give as good as she gets in that relationship. Like, she's no wallflower, just like waiting by the phone for him to call. She's like, look, I'll call you when I want some, and you can call me when you want some, but we're also going to treat each other professionally and with respect when we're in this room. And there's a real warmth there in the few scenes that Westberg and Atkins share together. There's a real warmth and mutual respect there. And I think that if we saw that filmed through a different lens, like in a modern lens, I think that there would be a lot more leering. It would be a lot more of a difference in power dynamic overall. I think the character of Teddy might be the same age as the character of Ellie at that point. There wouldn't be like a woman in her late 30s, early 40s in that role. It would be like someone just coming out of college. So you have, I think, some real thought going into one of the smaller characters in the movie, but still has a real thought behind it.
Well, that and she gets killed 100% because of Daniel Chalice.
Right.
Like that guy brings up. Yeah, I mean, the kids would have died, and that goes without saying, and that's whatever. But but Chalice adds so many other like bodies to the body count because of just like putting his nose where it doesn't belong.
Yeah.
Trying to save the world.
Mm-hmm.
What a dick.
But it's just like, I don't know. I think that there's, this movie would not work nearly as well as it did if someone besides Tom Atkins had this role. There's like that everyman quality about him that really makes it, I think, work overall. And really, I think part of the reason for the affection of this movie. Yeah. I do think it's interesting that, Nancy Loomis, who just like 4 or 5 years ago before this movie was playing a high school senior, is all of a sudden like a married woman in her 30s with a 10 and a 9-year-old. Like that was kind of jarring to see that.
It's bizarre for sure.
Well, it's interesting too, because I mean, as a kid, I was just fascinated with any connection, whether it made sense or not. So I mean, even as a child, I thought it was the coolest thing to see these kind of recurring actors and things. Yeah. And I think that that's a big reason why I was so just latched on to the films of John Carpenter, because it was fun, kind of like Scorsese now or other directors. It was fun to see the same people in so many different things. I mean, you even have like Jamie Lee returning, just for like a voice role. But I mean, how many Carpenter movies was she in,
Right.
All of them, basically.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like anyway, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep, I would agree. So I think it's impossible not to talk about this movie and not talk about Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which you get the name of the town, Santa Mira, taken directly from this movie. Deborah Hill has said when discussing Halloween 3 and promoting it, she said, "This isn't a knife movie, it's a pod movie," meaning that this is very much about losing one's identity, getting submerged, and not really being able to be yourself at that point. So even though this movie's not, say, a direct remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers like the 1970s version with Donald Sutherland is, its fingerprints is all over this movie, from the town, from that, like Jerry, you had mentioned, that feeling of paranoia that really pervades this movie, to not knowing who you can trust, what is real and what isn't real. That is all over this.
Oh, no, definitely. I think that the inspiration from Body Snatchers and Siegel's movie in general, I think it's very heavy in this one. And I think that it comes off more as an inspiration and less lifting from it, especially like, this day and age, every movie wants to be an 80s slasher movie. And, they put a filter on it and they try to make it, you know what I mean? Like it loses the magic. Whereas Halloween 3, its love for Siegel's movie and its love for just Body Snatchers in general, I think it's very genuine and it's very pure. And I think that's one of the many things that just makes it such a charming but mean-spirited movie.
I can hear my daughter in the background cackling.
Maniacal laughter.
I don't know if that is coming through on the show.
It's because she's watching the Silver Shamrock broadcast.
Oh my God.
Bye.
I think she's watching some video about baby sharks, or there's one kind of, I don't know, like she's watching some weird shit on YouTube right now, as far as I know. So
amazing.
Oh man. So I'm sorry, Izzy. You seem like before my daughter interrupted with her horrible sound of children's laughter filling the house. You were starting to talk about like the the influence of Body Snatchers on this as well.
I mean, yeah, it's undeniable for sure. I wonder if that was there in the original script or if it only came through in Tommy Lee Wallace's pass. I think, didn't John Carpenter do a pass as well?
He did.
It would make sense if he was the one to put that in there. Especially with his nihilistic tendencies here.
That, and I mean, I think Carpenter's influences kind of run rampant through all of his films. You know, his just love for Howard Hawks is in Assault on Precinct 13. You know, I think his love for a lot of European films is kind of obvious in Halloween. You know, so I could totally see Carpenter coming up with this stuff too. He's really good at, I think, homaging things he loves without it seeming forced.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and Wallace definitely, although Carpenter's fingerprints are all over this movie in terms of the score, and I think kind of having a feel for like the look of the film overall, like Wallace did not like Neil's script for the movie, and he did a rewrite of it. And Wallace hated the script that Carpenter turned in. And it's funny because this is the second time that like Wallace looked at something Carpenter did and just wasn't a fan of it. Like he originally passed on directing Halloween 2 because he felt like the script Carpenter turned in was kind of blah, and he just really didn't feel like it was something he wanted to get involved in. And then he looked at what Carpenter's rewrites added to Halloween 3 and said, I have to go over this now as well, because he just wasn't a fan of what Carpenter kind of added. And there's really not a lot of detail in terms of like who is responsible for what overall. But I think that just kind of like based on the idea of this real, what Wallace directing the movie and what we got as an end result, I think that you can say that Wallace is really responsible for this really being a homage to like Siegel's film.
Yeah, I think there was a recent fan-made poster for Halloween 3, and it basically was Season of the Witch, minus the Halloween 3 thing. Because everyone has always said, myself included, that if it was just called Season of the Witch, it probably would have found its audience more. But the thing that bothered me about this fan-made poster, as amazing as it looked, is it said John Carpenter's Halloween 3. And while Carpenter is God as far as I'm concerned, and obviously he had such a huge hand in Halloween 3, I think a lot of people fail to remember that it's Tommy Lee Wallace's movie. You know what I mean? And I mean, just from like talking to Atkins or other actors for the Halloween 3 piece I did, like Tommy Lee Wallace was very hands-on with his actors. Carpenter was more involved with kind of like the effects and magic and like, cinematography stuff. Exactly. That was where his, desire was. But Tommy Wallace was so hands-on with the actors. He knew exactly what he wanted. He knew exactly how to get it. And it's very much his film.
I agree.
Yeah, and I don't think this is like a poltergeist situation where you have like who did this, Spielberg or Tobe Hooper. Like, no, this is a Wallace film. But sometimes when you're in the shadow of someone like such a giant like John Carpenter, it does become easy to forget, who is responsible for what, even when it's someone under that troupe. That doesn't necessarily mean it's from John Carpenter, but it's just easy to get kind of lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
And Wallace has gone on to have like a really good career of his own. I mean, he did Fright Night 2, which is a awesome movie. It's just an underrated movie. He's responsible for It, the television version, which is probably one of the most beloved adaptations of a Stephen King property of all time. And, given the limitations at the time, he churned out something really memorable. So it's not like Tommy Lee Wallace is just this hack,
Definitely not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not calling Rick Rosenthal a hack, but he's no Rick Rosenthal.
Yeah. Well, just kidding. Not everybody can get Busta Rhymes to give.
I'm gonna get hate mail from Rick Rosenthal's wife now.
Yeah, him and Adam Marcus's wife are gonna write us.
Jesus, they hate me.
So Jerry, your job is to get every filmmaker's wife to just absolutely hate on our show.
I think I'm already there, to be honest.
What if the filmmaker is a woman? Do you get my husband to hate on you?
Well, she could be married to a woman. What are we why are we being so heteronormative?
Why are you gonna, avoid the question?
You're answering a question with a question right now.
I think everyone's gonna get mad at me at some point if they hadn't already. Like we could just mention Death Wave and it'll start again.
Well, to To Izzy's point, though, let's take a look. Like, aside from when you look at, because we cover all franchises, so you have Nightmare on Elm Street, where you have Rachel Talalay doing Freddy's Dead. Yeah, we could do American Psycho 1 and 2, even though it's only 2 entries. You have Mary Harron. You have Mary Lambert with Pet Sematary 1 and 2.
Oh,
but,
yes.
like, and it's a real shitty thing. Like, we don't have enough movies that have been helmed by women that really get to do franchises. Like, they don't get the same opportunities as men do, and I think that's really shitty.
Well, I think also when it comes to like our podcast in general, and I'm not saying this to pat us on the back, because it should be this way. But I think that was one of the first conversations you and I had, Mike, about this thing. We don't want to just be another podcast with 2 white guys telling, our side of everything, Like, I'd like to have more female guests than male guests. You know what I mean? Because, like, I only know what it's like and to have a perspective for myself. And I do think it's such a travesty that we don't have more female filmmakers. I mean, I would kill to do an episode on Karen Kusama's work, because I think The Invitation and Destroyer are 2 of the best films ever made, but when it comes to franchises, like you said, I mean, we have very little to do, and I think it sucks.
That's because it does.
Yeah. And I want to get more of Izzy's perspective on that right now, because I think because what's interesting to me is a lot of these movies, and Halloween 3 maybe is not the best example of it, but you have these really strong, iconic female characters, but they're always written from a man's perspective, and they're always filmed from a man's perspective, and you're given very masculine traits overall. And not to say that traits can't be universal, but I mean, in general, you have these characters that are filmed very much from the lens of us overall, and you never get that other side, and you never get that other perspective.
Yeah, well, that's the history of cinema, isn't it? I mean, back when cinema started in this country, and even in Paris, women were at the forefront, and gradually got pushed out and buried. And there's only a couple of specific names that people even know. And that's not even until like fucking Ida Lupino in the 50s, she started out as an actor and became a director, and a very, very successful one at that. But yeah, you have like Alice Guy Blanche and I wish I knew more names myself. But the fact is they've been erased by men throughout history because, dudes are more important. So we have right now, thankfully, a bit of a spotlight on women directors and women genre directors in particular, which I'm very, very grateful to see happening, and in my own small way be part of. And if you go to the theater, you're going to see, if you go to a horror movie, you're going to see at least half that audience be women. And in most cases, women do buy like 60-70% of the tickets. And I'll tell you why. Because to be a woman growing up in the society is to experience horror firsthand all the fucking time. Whether you're being ogled on the street as a young girl by strangers or even anyone in your family, whether you're being actively oppressed at work, whether you're being paid less, whether your body is doing something totally fucking insane that you hate and you have no control over. All of this is horror to me. And it makes total sense why there are many, many women horror directors, authors, programmers, and, filmmakers. But we still don't get financed and pushed to the forefront the way men do, because guys like to see themselves. They like to raise up, male proteges. They like to fund male films, and us, not so much. We've got a much higher bar. So the fight is still going. So any male allies that want to support us, we are grateful. And here we are.
And Izzy, this is something you and I have talked about throughout the years, many times off air. And Jerry, you and I have talked about this on the show, but to me, horror and just storytelling in general is more interesting when you get perspectives outside of the one that you grew up on. Like, it's, if you see the same character, if you see a character that looks just like you or sounds just like you all the time, after a while that gets really boring. So when you get to see, especially in horror, what is it that scares other people? What is it that we're terrified of overall? The things that terrify Jerry and I are going to be different from what terrifies a person that doesn't look like me, that doesn't have the same gender as me, that doesn't have the same sexuality as me, that's from a different economic status. Like all of these things not only make for more interesting storytelling, but also help create a lot more empathy in the world, because you can start to learn about perspectives that exist outside your own.
Well, I've
1,000%.
found, yeah, definitely. I've found, to be honest, that a lot of female written films kind of hit me in more of emotional way than male. I mean, it's Deborah Hill's writing of the original Halloween, those characters that, you know what I mean? Like I identify with Laurie Strode more than any character ever written. And that's a Deborah Hill thing. One of my favorite, not just horror films, but films of the last 10 years is a film by Lee Janiak, Honeymoon.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And I think that is one of the best written horror films of all time. Like I could watch Honeymoon 24/7 because it hits me in a way that a lot of other filmmakers don't. There's films like that, or Raw. You know what I mean? Like these are films that, I mean, I might not be female, but I feel like, to be honest, I just feel like female writers are better. And I'm sure that some bros are going to be pissed about that, but that's just how it is.
Well, again, for the most part, they have to be.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be to get anywhere.
Right. You have to be better by a factor of 4. It seems like you then, in order to get not even the same opportunity, but just an opportunity. It often feels like.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's an emotional honesty, I think, that female filmmakers aren't afraid to tap into, that I think a lot of their male counterparts are. I think from an early age, men are taught, unfortunately, to hold our emotions and our struggles inside. Whereas, I've always found it so courageous that female filmmakers they don't seem to have that. They're honest, and to be honest, even outside of that, some of the work is just much, much better. So I definitely think it's a huge disservice to filmmaking and horror in general that we don't see more of that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, 2 of the best horror movies of the past decade. You have Jennifer Kent's The Babadook, because I love approaching horror from the perspective of mental health. I mean, that's the industry I'm in. It's, what I've devoted my life to kind of helping people out. And I think it's one of the best examinations of depression and the crippling effects of major depressive order and what that can do, and then using narrative therapy as a technique to heal from that. Karen Kusama's The Invitation is such a moving and stirring view of the grieving process and how do we cope with loss and grief. And I've worked with parents that have lost their children, and there is you're almost grieving 2 different losses. You're grieving the loss of the actual child, but you're also grieving the loss of the person that will never get to be. And I think that look is such a beautiful, stirring look. And I don't know who else would be capable of coming up with something that vulnerable and that honest when you look at both of those movies.
Yeah.
I agree.
I mean, there's so, I hate to go on and on, but the patriarchy does indeed damage both sexes. And I think people are waking up to that. I want the men in my life to show emotion. I want them to be vulnerable. I want them to trust me. I want them to talk to me, but I also want them to connect with other men. And that's a huge damaging thing, that men can't talk to each other and they can't connect. And there's you would know more than me, Mike, but there's such a high rate of suicide, and it is fucking heartbreaking. And make no mistake, there are male directed and male written masterpieces out there. One of them I've just seen 3 times this year. It's called Daniel Isn't Real by my friend Adam Mortimer.
Oh.
It is, Jesus Christ, I love that film deeply.
He's one of my favorite directors working today. Adam is such a great guy in general.
Yeah. And I shout about it to anyone who will listen, because I love that film so much, and he's become a really good friend, and I think he's going to be huge. So Yeah. If anyone's looking to explore themes of suicidal ideation, nihilism, empathy, art versus like tortured artists versus like how much of yourself do you give away as a tortured artist, and versus happiness, like it's blown me away. So yeah, keep that in mind, you guys, if you're looking for a really interesting horror film about mental health.
Yep. We just screened that one out at Telluride Horror Show a couple weeks ago, and that, I would say, among a couple others, was one of the biggest hits of the festival in terms of like what people were looking forward to seeing, because it's gotten such strong buzz from other festivals, but people walking out of it were like, yep, the hype and the praise that this movie has earned is real. So I think December 6th-ish is when that will be in some theaters and video on demand. So it's something I would strongly recommend everybody get a chance to check out.
That makes me incredibly happy because I haven't had a chance to see it yet. But I mean, I've been a huge fan of his since Some Kind of Hate, his first film, and even his music videos for Against Me, which is one of my favorite bands. And I felt like Some Kind of Hate had this, like, it really tapped into that kind of male aggression and anger that we feel a lot of times, So, I mean, I'm excited as hell to watch that one.
Yeah, you'll also like the part because he also goes into toxic masculinity and consent. And Jesus, I'm just so fucking happy and proud of that guy,
So I just want to steer it back a little bit towards Halloween 3, only because I have to cook dinner for the family in a little bit, and if I don't start cooking, they'll throw frozen meatballs at my head, which is not good. So, but I now we're going to go from really serious talk, which I think is important, and we should have more discussions like that, to a movie about a kid with snakes coming out of his mouth. But I know I kind of want to talk a little bit about the effects of this movie, because Jerry, you had made the point. This might be the most graphic of all the Halloween movies overall. The effects in this are absolutely fantastic.
Oh, I mean, you have everything right from the beginning. You have a guy, before you find out he's a robot, you have a dude with gloves basically putting his hand inside someone's like skull and breaking it. Right from the beginning. Right from the beginning, you know that this is something different. This is not Halloween 1 or 2. I mean, you have Marge. She's fucking around with the little part on the mask, and it just zaps her, and it just destroys her face.
Her face is fucked up.
I know.
And it's like the lips being burned back, the teeth. It's so grotesque.
Yeah, it really is.
I've always, when it comes to the Halloween films, there are 2 movies actually 3, that I show my kids to scare them. The first Halloween, because to this day, I still think it's the scariest movie ever made. Halloween 5, because as many warts as that movie has, it's still pretty scary in its stalking. And Halloween 3, just to fucking gross them out. Like the pumpkin head scene with, with little Buddy, which is, that kid is more annoying than Franklin in Texas Chainsaw.
No, that is so not true.
No, I want to strangle him.
He doesn't even get enough screen time to be as annoying as
I cannot stand that kid.
Well, what about, how would you compare him to Little Bob in House by the Cemetery?
I've never been that bothered. It's Little Buddy and Franklin are kind of like my biggest pet peeves.
See, Buddy's only in the movie for like 3 minutes, though.
I know.
But you know what? We've all come across those kids.
Yeah.
He's only in the film for a very small amount of time, but we know what kind of fucking kid that is. We know him. Every time I pick up my kids from school, there's always a little Buddy running around, throwing things, pulling my daughter's hair.
Yeah,
I know little Buddy. I'm glad he's dead. Fuck you, little Buddy.
Wow.
Fair enough, man.
Strong words.
I like it.
Strong words. And it's funny because that family is annoying. And it's almost like the comic relief that you get in Last House on the Left with the cops, right? Which is like completely odd. And you have the same thing in Halloween 5 where you have like the bumbling cops and you have like the music. But this is just this really like stumble bum family that is super annoying. Just like, I could see the family as a whole. You definitely want to strangle, but they come to it's kind of like the boyfriend in Midsummer. Like the boyfriend in Midsummer, Chris, he sucks. Does he suck to the point where he should be burned alive wearing a bear suit?
Maybe.
Yes.
Maybe, but
Director's cut.
I have not seen it.
not
I don't
yet.
know if I could take 3 hours of her screaming.
No,
You know what I mean?
no. The director's cut, honestly, even if you didn't like the film, I would highly recommend it. It's on iTunes. It any question of did the boyfriend really deserve it? Watch the director's cut and you'll say yes. He's a steaming pile of shit.
Oh,
He
wow.
is.
There's even more bullshit, huh?
Oh yeah, hardcore.
Right. But I mean, to me, if like I want to see like 3 hours of someone having like a screaming mental breakdown, I just have to go to work every day.
Oh, my
I think
God.
pretty much like that's my job,
I don't know how you do it, man. You're special.
Hard alcohol.
Fair enough.
Hard alcohol. Kittens and hard alcohol, basically.
Yeah.
Sometimes at the same time.
Yes.
Oh, excuse me. Now I lost track of thought because we have a kitten now.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, he's little Dusty's amazing. But basically, this family comes to a horrific end, and it's played as a joke at first, and then it becomes like because you don't know, like you have no idea what Cochrane's plan is at this point, and it just you had this really brutal. This is what scared the bejesus out of me as a kid, and even though like I had not watched this movie for 20 years, this always stuck with. This is like the scene in Salem's Lot where the vampire jumps out of the jail cell. It's one of the scariest scenes in horror movie history. This kid's face melting, and not just melting, but bugs and snakes and cockroaches coming out of this mask. It's fucking
greatest.
awesome.
Yeah, and then like in the warehouse, he's got Tom Atkins tied up, and they sort of look at him like, "Look at this! I dare you to watch." You know, he's got this really devious fucking look on his face.
No,
like,
they're having fun making Chalice watch it. But what I think is another funny thing, and is they also force Chalice to watch John Carpenter's Halloween.
That's great. I know.
And this film was made in 1982. And the funniest thing about the movie isn't Chalice's womanizing, isn't that he needs a six-pack to go, is that on the advertisement for Halloween, inside of Halloween 3, it says, The Immortal Classic. That movie had been out for like 4 or 5 years at that point. Was it really an Immortal Classic already?
Probably.
I would say so. I would, because it made a shit ton of money by that point, right? And let's face it, it's advertising. You're not going to say like, hey, this pretty good movie.
Decent movie that Jared thinks, but
like I saw a tweet today and it was like, hey, it's been 6 years. Can we say that the Evil Dead remake is one of the best horror movies of all time? And my answer to that was like, hard to know on that one. Hard to know. It's a good movie.
Listen, Miska, no.
No, but look, it's 8 a.m. I haven't had coffee yet, but I'm going to go hard pass on this one. So I think you can kind of tell. Like, when we call Hereditary a classic, it's only 2 years old, right?
Yeah. I think it's amazing, but
I would probably say so. Yeah,
I would say so.
Right.
Sometimes a movie is just so good, you know that it's a classic, and you know it's achieved that status overall. And I would say the first time. And Jerry, it's your favorite movie of all time. Why am I defending this movie from the guy who it's his favorite movie of all time? What the fuck are we doing?
I just like being antagonistic, that's all.
Okay. So
it's always an Immortal Classic.
And so, is Michael Myers a worm in this movie? Should we ask?
Oh my God.
Sorry.
Marcus.
Is he one of the snakes?
But this is a movie, like, you did take Michael Myers out of this movie, but it's not necessarily a coming-of-age movie.
Not at all. Jesus, I'll never live that down.
No, we'll have to fit that in.
I do think it's funny that Halloween 3 exists in a world where the original Halloween exists as well. Because, I mean, it's in Halloween 3, I think 2 or 3 times when Chalice is drinking at the bar. I mean, which can mean a lot of things, because when isn't Chalice drinking in this movie? Their advertisement for Halloween. They're torturing him by making him watch Halloween. Like,
that's one of my favorite scenes, because when they switch channels, he asks the bartender to switch channel, because the guy says, "What's the matter? Don't you have any Halloween spirit?" And he goes, "No." really pronounced, like man, like a bah humbug thing,
Yeah.
It was super funny.
I could totally see though, like why Carpenter and company would want to do Halloween 3 after Halloween 2. I mean, right from the beginning, Carpenter was very outspoken about not being a fan of Halloween 2. I mean, even though he wrote it, like there's interviews from when the movie first came out, and he was just slamming it. It was not a good experience. And so this kind of gamble of doing this kind of, new Halloween film every year kind of thing, it didn't pay off at the box office, but I do think it's such a bold choice. And especially given us like we've all used the word nihilistic so many times in this episode, and with good reason, because it's a very bleak movie, but it's one of the only like very bleak, negative kind of movies that just brings me a smile. Like it's fun to watch, like it's a blast of a film.
So let's talk about the legacy of this movie. I think that's a good jumping off point right there. When this movie comes out, it tanks. It is made for about the same amount of money as Halloween 2, about $2.5 million, but it pulls in a lot less. It pulls in less than 15 million worldwide. And it sinks the idea of this. It sinks the idea of like Halloween becoming an anthology series. What was it that made audiences hate this movie so much at its time?
They just wanted more Michael Myers because it was already set up as a franchise at that point with the sequel. I think if they had probably gone directly to Season of the Witch instead of 2, may not have happened, the vitriol. So, but who can say? I mean, I like the idea of the anthology instead of more slasher films that are formulaic for the most part. Do you guys know if they had other stories developed for the anthology aspect with different stories and characters?
I don't know.
I've never come across anything that says that, and it wouldn't shock me if they had this kind of gesticulating for a long time. But, Yablans and Assad wanted to do Halloween 2 before they would even come close. Because I think we all know, like, Halloween 2, as fun as it is, it's running on fumes. Like, there really were no ideas for it at this point. So I don't know of anything where they have had, like, here's, like, 3 other ideas we have. Let's pick our best one and then make the other 2 later.
I think the biggest bummer about Halloween 3, other than it just didn't do well, is, and, this might come off like I'm talking shit about Halloween 4, and I'm not, because it's one of my favorite movies of all time. Like, I love it it's an entertaining film. Like, I love it with a passion. I still don't think it's a good Halloween sequel. And so what happened was Halloween 3 bombed horribly. So they went back to like, well, we have to give them Michael Myers. But what they did is they kind of assumed their audience that was just filled with idiots. Out of nowhere we get Michael Myers. He's okay after being burnt to crisp. He got shot in the eyes twice. He got poked in the eye. His eye poked out basically in the first film. And they were expected to basically just get on board with the dude that wakes up 10 years later. His muscles don't have like atrophy or anything, and he has like superhuman strength.
And he's Superman all of a sudden.
Yeah,
basically, yeah. And it's like, you know what I mean? Like it was such a slap to the face to, I think, Carpenter. And like I said, I love Halloween 4 and I like Halloween 5 a lot too. As horror films, as sequels to Halloween, no, not at all. And I think Halloween 3, as much as it differed from the first 2 films, I do feel like it's one of the best sequels because it has that Halloween spirit, in spades.
Do you think that this movie would have been more successful in an age, because Izzy, to your point, people were expecting Michael Myers and didn't get him aside from him appearing on a television screen in a bar. Do you think this would have been more successful? Because in an age where you could have been more prepared, that there was like film Twitter and film sites and saying like, this is what we have coming up. Like we're moving away from Michael Myers. Back then you had maybe Fangoria or Starlog. But if you weren't reading those magazines, unless you like bought a ticket, you really wouldn't know what you were heading in for when you walked into a movie theater.
Right. Are you asking if they had better PR?
Yeah,
to set
if it
people
was
up
like-
for expectations.
Yeah, if you could have set expectations up for the first time this comes out, would you have think this movie would be more successful?
I mean, who knows? Maybe, maybe not. I think being a filmmaker now, having been a journalist before as well as a festival programmer, I have recognized that it's hard to make a film. But now, in a filmmaker's shoes, any fucking movie that ever gets made is a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
It is a miracle. And like, I don't think that the general populace understands it because you make it look so easy. And if it somehow comes out horribly, it's the fault of the director no matter what. Although it is an entire army of people who work on this thing, and anything can go wrong at any time for any one person, and it shows. So to make a good film is like a miracle of miracles. And I think more people need to wake up to that fact. So, I don't give a damn. It's like what is that meme with Tom and his mustache? Like Tom Atkins doesn't give a fuck what we care about Halloween 3.
Mm-hmm.
Neither do I.
Well,
I love
that, and I think that unfortunately, studios care a little too much about not the viewers, but like outside perspective. It used to be that a film would get made because they want to make the movie. And now
it's about money only.
Exactly, and they went back to the Michael Myers with Halloween 4 because fans were pissed about 3 not having him. But I remember after Halloween H2O came out on the official Halloween site, they basically asked people, "Okay, we're going to make a sequel. What do you want on it?" And it was a poll of Michael Myers, not Michael Myers, and all of this kind of stuff.
Oh, boy.
And I feel like when you have a whole committee deciding what your movie is going to be instead of
chaos.
Exactly. Right. You know what I mean? And I feel like the test screenings and those kind of things, I feel like they really defeat the passion and the creativity in there. I mean, a lot of people didn't like the newest Hellboy, and I understand why. Because you hire someone like Neil Marshall to make a film, and then you second guess and overstep every single thing he does.
Right.
And I feel like that's where Halloween and the series lost something great when they kind of just stopped listening to Carpenter. I mean, Carpenter and Hill had a really great idea for Halloween 4 before they decided not to go with it. And Carpenter and Hill basically washed their hands, of the franchise.
What was the idea?
They had this idea, and they got this writer, I forgot who it was, that basically the thing was, okay, Halloween 3 didn't work, so the producers wanted Michael Myers involved. Carpenter and Hill and this writer had this idea that basically the town of Haddonfield was trying to outlaw Halloween and no talk of Michael Myers whatsoever. And kind of like Wes Craven's New Nightmare, the more you try to kind of suffocate something, the stronger it gets. And that is what would bring Michael Myers and his evil back, is trying to erase it. And I think that's interesting. It's not like just some dude that wakes up from a coma and goes after people, with a big iron, But
did you read about the test screenings for Karen Kusama's Jennifer's Body?
No.
Dude. Okay, so there's an article floating around because they recently did like a 10-year anniversary screening at Beyond Fest or something at the Egyptian in Hollywood. And so their entire Q&A is in a Vulture article that's floating around right now. And I shared it earlier or last night if either of you wants to read it on Facebook. But it just the most unbelievable test screening where they had an audience of, teenage boys or early 20-something, young adult men, and they just wanted more boobs. They didn't care about anything else, and the studio listened to them and marketed it poorly and basically focused only on the fact that, Megan Fox is hot. And the movie didn't do well because it was marketed extremely wrongly and misogyny. So here we are. But you got to read the article. It's crazy.
I think I've just pulled it up here. I might even put a link to it because it's a dark time. Megan Fox and Karen Kusama revisit the Jennifer Bodies backlash.
Yeah.
So we'll put a link up to that here in our show notes as well for our listeners who want to do a little bit of reading. And I'm going to bookmark that so I can look at that in a bit. So for Halloween 3, when did the view of it turn around? 'Cause it feels like in the past 10 years, Halloween 3 has gone from being like a reviled movie, a franchise killer, to like, oh, it's underrated, to one where a lot of people rank it just behind that absolute piece of garbage, John Carpenter's. Again, I kid.
What piece of garbage? You're talking about
Yes.
Halloween 2?
No, Halloween 1. So for
Oh
a
my
lot
God.
of
You're
people,
ridiculous.
for a lot of people, it's their favorite movie aside from the original Halloween.
I think that the tide turned with Scream Factory's Blu-ray. Was it like 2012? I think it came out.
Yeah, I think so.
It could have been like a little bit before that, but that was when I really, like me personally, I started noticing a lot of these in defense of articles. And it seemed like the more that people revisited it, maybe they weren't as precious with the series by then because, you got to think when Halloween 3 came out, we had Halloween and Halloween 2, which were pretty fucking marvelous, In 2012, the most recent thing we had was Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, which, I mean, I don't know about you, but me personally, I'm not really digging Michael Myers being led by the ghost of his mom in a white horse. You know what I mean? So maybe that's when people were like, you know what? Let's give this a shot because we've seen a lot worse. Maybe we were wrong. And they fucking were. They were. You motherfuckers were wrong. Because Halloween 3 was always great. It has always been one of the best films in the series.
Agreed.
So how about for you, Izzy? When did you start noticing the tide turning on this movie?
I mean, definitely within the last 7 years, for sure. It's hard to say, but I'm glad that people are waking the hell up because it's such a fucking crazy, awesome, beautiful, mad science fiction film. Like it's made of all these Frankenstein parts, and it's not perfect, but it is perfect to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love it very much.
Almost to the point where it's come around, like I'm looking, like in defense of Halloween 3, like, or hot take, Halloween 3 is the best Halloween sequel. I can say, like, it's not a hot take anymore. I think this is an almost universally beloved movie by the horror community now, and I think with good reason. I think, like, everything from, like, Dawn Post masks. This might be Carpenter's best score overall. Like, I love the score to this movie.
Even more than The Thing?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Well, The Thing is
I know,
not Carpenter's score, but
it's Ennio plus Carpenter-esque,
right,
with some bits in there. So that's why I still count it.
Yeah.
What's been great is seeing.
I think from start to finish, it might be his strongest score. From like the whole start to finish, this might be his best score.
What's interesting is seeing all the homages to Halloween 3 in other films. David Gordon Green's film had, 3 kids with a silver shamrock mask, or even Wingard's The Guest. That whole end sequence in the kind of like haunt, there were big references to Halloween 3. Like, I feel like it's so just commonly loved at this point where, I mean, like I said, it's great, but, I
have to rewatch that. It's been a long time since I've seen The Guest, but I remember loving it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I think we'll end with this for our final thoughts, but how you can't get the Silver Shamrock theme out of your head. It's just, it's
almost
devious.
Time, kids.
Yeah. It's just devious how
Tune
catchy
in for
it
the
is.
big giveaway at 9. Don't forget your masks.
But like you start playing that song and it gets in your head and you just cannot stop thinking about it. Oh, stop. I'm gonna be fucking
You
nuts.
expected that. Don't tell me that you did not.
Oh
Come on
my
now.
god.
That's my wife's ringtone.
That's amazing.
Like anytime she's not in the room, I kind of like lean over and put her phone on silent because I just can't do it. Like I love it with the passion, but I will be humming that for days on end.
Right, that's fair.
Yeah, it's just like it's did Carpenter write that bit? Was that brought in? Like, is that all Carpenter at that point coming on with that theme? Like,
I think it's Howard's, isn't it? I think
we're gonna have to ask him that because
that's right.
it seems way too playful for Carpenter.
Yeah.
But oh my god, it's just so catchy and fun, and it will melt your brain. I don't think it's anything to do with Stonehenge. I think hearing that song on repeat is what melts the kid's brain at that point.
That
That's
or
quite possible.
Tommy Lee Wallace's just silky smooth voice.
Could
Yeah.
be. The man's got some pipes. So we talked briefly about the ending of this movie, and I think we're all in agreement. Like, these kids are fucked. Like, at the end of the day, these kids are they're all dead. But I think it's such a brilliant end. I think that close up of Aki's a sweaty, hot mess by that point. All his composure is gone. He's just ripped the arm off his robot girlfriend and basically killed her. At that point, which is incredible. So he's
it's full circle. It comes full circle. He's basically the crazy guy from the beginning.
Exactly, and he's back at that same gas station.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Which I did not notice until my most recent watch of this movie. I'm like, holy shit, it's the same station. Yeah. So you're right. Like, it's the cycle of life, or it's like the circle of life. It's
basically a Lion King spinoff.
It's really a Lion King prequel. It's what Halloween 3 is.
And also, it goes back to the fact of the nihilism here. Whatever you do, it doesn't matter. You're fucked.
You're fucked.
Yeah.
Completely messed, yeah. So
and it's also the best homage to the end of Body Snatchers as well. Mm-hmm. So yes, I think it goes back to that as well.
Mm-hmm. But you have the reverb on the stop it and then go right to credits at that point. If you're not that is a gut punch of an ending. It might be the best ending of any of the Halloween movies.
Aside from the first one.
Sure. Judges will accept.
I love it very much, and that's what I have to say.
Judges will accept. So, Do we have any last words on Halloween 3 before we cut it for the night?
You were all wrong.
All of you.
And you're welcome, motherfuckers.
Yes. Right?
Yeah. So, I think we can close the book. I think that this was a lot of fun, and I think listeners, you can tell these are the episodes that are really fun to do when you have 3 people that absolutely love a movie and want to gush over it and just really spill our love for the movie overall.
This was also our most aggressive sounding episode I've learned.
I will take full responsibility for that.
No, Izzy just bring out the aggression in everybody at that point. So yeah, I am gonna.
It's not the first time.
Yeah, I'm going to hang up and go punch someone in the face.
Yeah!
Just some random person. Just punch them as hard as I can in the face. I kind of want to bring this movie to school and bring in a bunch of these masks and make the kids wear them at school and then show them this and watch them freak the fuck out.
Oh my God, you're so evil right now.
Yeah, and
I love it.
I work, I think that would be a blast. I think I would be fired.
Probably.
I don't think I'd have a job anymore. But
if you hate your job, that's a fun way to go out.
I kind of dig it. But we could also teach them about the fine art of seduction, Tom Atkins style.
Oh my God, dude!
He did start the Atkins diet, which is cigarettes, beer, scotch, and vagina. It's basically the Atkins diet.
Oh my God!
All right, so I think that's the note we're going to go out on. Thank you so much for jumping with us tonight. Before we go, you are basically one of the hardest working people I know and one of the busiest people I know. So tell us a little bit about some of the films that you have playing the circuit right now. There's 3 off the top of my head, and I know that I'm missing a few out of
that. So there are 3 shorts. My Monster stars Bria Grant, Adam Egypt Mortimer, and who directed Daniel Isn't Real, and Steve Johansson. Directed by myself, and that is making the rounds, but coming down. It's been playing for maybe a year and a half now. I have The Obliteration of the Chickens, which is a Werner Herzog-esque treatise on nihilism and existentialism, and it's actually kind of a comedy, believe it or not. And it's
all stock footage, right?
Yes, that's all stock footage narrated by my friend, the really great author Bracken McLeod. And then Rehome stars Gigi Saul Guerrero, Casey Lansdale, and Morgan Peter Brown. And that is also making the rounds right now. And that's about immigration and the nonsense going on down between U.S. and Mexico.
And your films have always had like a political slant to them and a very like progressive slant to them overall. How important do you see this intersection of like progressive politics and genre films?
I think horror and politics have been around forever. You can go all the way back to like White Zombie, which I think was 1931, and that's about, you know, slavery and voodooism and controlling women and controlling people of color. And, you know, I mean, we would go back to the very, very instances of cinema. Horror is a genre that it goes hand in hand with making a statement to be light about it. But you can get away with a lot of really great things, not just the spectrum of human emotion, but you can basically say whatever you want and encase it in horror. I mean, I don't want to be flippant about it, but that's basically what it is. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. You have that you're working on right now, or that are making the festival circuit right now. You've got some work that have come up in some new anthologies, and what else do you have going on?
Yeah, I have a couple of stories out in some short horror anthologies. One is called Tales from the Crust, an anthology of pizza horror. And that my story in there is Demons of 1994. I've also got a story called Famous Last Words in an anthology called Lost Films, as well as I Did It for the Art, which is in the all-female horror anthology Fright into Flight, among others.
And your work can be found on Amazon right now. Like if somebody wanted to buy, where will we actually go find those works?
Yeah, you can look me up on Amazon. I have an author's page there. I've got a Goodreads page. Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing is another place where you can get a couple of those anthologies, Lost Films and the Pizza Horror Anthology, as well as Dark Moon Digest, which I have a story in issue 35 of that, co-written with Casey Lansdale, and that's all about Hollywood sex and death. Super fun. So yeah.
And what else do you have coming up in the future? Any new projects? Boy. You can actually you just were named with this new streaming service as well, correct?
Yeah. So I am a vice president at a forthcoming app called Ficto, and I am VP of Programming Outreach, and so I am sourcing new series and long short films to segment into series, and we'll be launching early next year.
Okay, so we'll definitely be on the lookout for that, and when that comes out, we'll definitely tweet out. So if our listeners want to find your work, where is the best, or they just want to get in contact with you, like where is the best way through the socials right now to do that?
Sure. The easiest way is just to go to my website, which has all that stuff, nihilnoctem.com, which is NIHILNOCTEM.com.
Perfect. And what we'll do is we'll put a link to that over there in our show notes, listeners, so you can go in, ooh, it's looking good. So we have some trailers up there, and I know that the Obliteration of the Chickens was done in conjunction with like Michael Epstein and Sophia Cacciola. Am I saying that right?
Mike was my editor for the Obliteration of the Chickens. They both worked on Rehome.
Oh, they both worked in Rehome. So
yeah, she shot that.
We're former filmmakers from Boston that moved out to greener pastures out west, but we love them, love them dearly.
Yes.
So, Izzy, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are so glad to have you on. Listeners, thank you very much. Stay tuned. Later this week, we actually have a really special episode coming up. Halloween Day, we are going to be dropping a special commentary on Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, where Jerry and I are going to be joined by our kids who are going to be giving their running commentary in the movie. So for folks that are getting in from trick-or-treating on Halloween night and plan on throwing on like a really fun slasher, and look, you can listen to the commentary while you watch a different movie. I mean, there's no rule against it. It just might not really make sense, but we're really excited to bring that to you guys. So until next week, thanks again. We are the Pod and the Pendulum, and we'll hear from you guys soon.
Yay!
Perfect. There we go.